Hey, fourth graders. We are still working with fractions. We will be in our next chapter too, but we're doing a review today and looking at what we have learned, getting ready for our end of our chapter test. We know that a fraction shows a piece of something, and we know that a multiple is the answers when we multiply. Multiple of 4 would be all the answers of 4, 4, 8, 12, 16. We know a product is the answer to a certain multiplication problem. So, let's check this out. A something can name part of a whole. Which one would be the one that names a piece or part? That's our fraction. We've been looking at fractions and working with those numbers that talk about just pieces or parts of the whole thing. And fractions are easy. It just takes practice. So if you aren't quite there, it just takes practice. A something of a number is the product of the number and a counting number. So we said that all the answers, when we multiply, the products are called the answers for an individual problem, like 3 times 2 equals 6. That's the product. But all the answers for the threes, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, and so on, those are the multiples. So a multiple of a number would be the product, the specific answer, of a number and a counting number. So in other words, all of the answers. Can you see that now? Okay. Oh, it missed me having you here and reminding me if it gets out of focus, because I don't always notice that. So now we're listing the next 4 multiples. We said the multiples are all the answers for a specific number that we're multiplying, but when we are doing multiples of a fraction, the denominator stays the same, because all these pieces are still divided into 8, and the multiples go up by 1 because it started by 1. So 1 times 2 is 2, 1 times 3 is 3, 1 times 4 is 4, 1 times 5 is 5. Those are all the answers for the ones. Let's see if we can make it a little bit bigger without losing our focus here. Oh, yep, lost it, didn't we? I forgot to tell you that we're on page 337. Hopefully you've found that and paused and got your book out, because then when it fades out, you can still see your book. Our next fraction order, of course, will have 4 in the denominator. The denominator doesn't change. It just tells us how many pieces each one of these things is divided into. Again, we have a 1. So 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 3 is 3. 1 times 4 is 4. We're listing all the multiples of 1. 1 times 5 is 5. So these are pretty easy when we're doing multiples of a unit fraction. Remember, a unit fraction is these, or anything with a 1 in the numerator. On our next section, we write the fraction as a product. Product means we're going to have to use the multiplication sign, remember, of a whole number, which means not a fraction, and a unit fraction. Remember, we just said a unit fraction has a 1 in the numerator. So we've got a whole number and a unit fraction. It's going to be anything that has a 1 at the top in the numerator. What would the whole number be for this one? Well, it would be 7 times, there's our product symbol, and then we have to put the unit fraction. We said a unit fraction has to have 1 in the numerator, and we know our denominator doesn't change. Is it true that 7 times 1 is 7? It is, isn't it? That's how we know our whole number is 7, because we know that to get 7, it's 1 times 7. How do we know what our whole number will be here? Well, let's kind of go backwards. We know that the 12 does not change. The denominator doesn't change. We know this has to be a unit fraction, so there has to be a 1 there. We know we have to have the sign for multiplication because it's a product. So as we work backwards, we can easily see what our whole number is, because to get to this 4, 1 times what is 4? Has to be 4, doesn't it? We can start backwards again or forwards. I'm going to go backwards. Denominator, same. Unit fraction has to be 1. Multiplication symbol has to be there because it said product. 1 times what equals 5? It's 5, isn't it? On our next one, we have to name the next multiples of the fraction. Remember, these multiples were easy because the first number was 1, so 1 times 2 was 2. We can go ahead and put all of our denominators in because the denominator doesn't change, but this doesn't start with 1. Now it's 3. We said 1 times 2 is 2. Now we have to say 3 times 2 is what? 6. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 4 is 12. 3 times 5 is 15. So while it looked like we were just counting here, that's because we started with 1 and we were multiplying 1 times 2, 1 times 3, 1 times 4. When we multiply 3 times those numbers, we get the multiples of 3. Denominators don't change. Let's fill those in. 2 times 2 is what? 4, right? And then the next thing is the third space, so it's 2 times 3 is 6. This is the fourth space over, so 2 times 4 is 8. And in the fifth blank over, it's 2 times 5 is 10. When we multiply fractions, I'm going to try to fold this over and see if that works better, if we can get in focus better. Okay, when we multiply fractions, we multiply the whole number times the numerator, because remember, the denominator stays the same. So 3 times 2 is 6. Our denominator will stay the same. So 2 times 3 is still 6. The denominator stays the same. 4 times 2 is 8. Again, when we multiply, we do the numerator. Now, I need to go back to this section in just a minute because there's more directions there, but let's go ahead and multiply these. Our denominator stays the same. 5 times 7 is 35. Our denominator stays the same. 4 times 3 is 12. Our denominator stays the same. 3 times 8 is 24. But this went on after the product. It said we need to write that as the product of a whole number and a unit fraction. So we have to do the same thing here. Oh my, I'm sorry, I didn't realize it had faded out on us. We have to do the same thing here that we did earlier. We want to change this where we have a unit fraction. So our denominator will stay the same. Our unit fraction is 1. We know product means multiply. 1 times what equals 6? 6. So our whole number is 6. Our denominator stays the same. A unit fraction has a 1 in the numerator. Product means multiply. 1 times what is 6? 6. And once again, our denominator stays the same, so when we're changing it to the product of a whole number and a unit fraction, oftentimes it's easier to start at the end of the problem and work backwards. Unit fraction has to have a 1 in the numerator. 1 times what equals 8? 1 times 8 equals 8. And then, and across the bottom of the page, we have the first part that's a little more difficult. And today, since this video is a little bit long and we try to keep them under 10 minutes, I'm going to stop this video, and this will be part 1, and then we'll start another video for these, because I think these are the ones that are causing the most confusion for some of you. So we'll do a whole nother video on that. So don't forget to try video